Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, and may God help you and grant you success. And we must thank the Ministry of Education for holding this forum and continuing holding this forum for the third year, for a consecutive third year. And this is an opportunity for all of us to learn from the presentations and the intellectual activity that is taking place in this forum for the development of education. This is the first panel discussion, and we are put in a desperate situation because this requires management skills, and it requires coordination among the people who are responsible for this session. And I met this group before coming here, and we agreed that most of our discussion is going to be by the audience. And this is an invitation for the people who have not given the opportunity to answer the question. So you will have around 40 minutes to answer these questions. The speakers at this session are Dr. Saleh Shamrani and Professor Rodney Hudson and Professor Arlene. The start, we will begin, and there is an introduction for each speaker for 5 minutes, and there is going to be discussion. And I'm not going to take much of the talk, so I'm going to manage the session. Please allow me to invite Dr. Saleh to talk to you, and he is a faculty member and a teaching faculty member at Kingside. He has a PhD in measurement and assessment, and he worked at the Ministry of Education and the Tatweer program, and he has participated in different areas in his specialty, especially in supervision of the TEMS, and we know the importance of the TEMS tests. And we invite Dr. Saleh in the first 5 minutes, and we hope that you stick to the time limit in order to give more time for discussion and dialogue. And we invite you to learn from this opportunity to interact with the speakers. In the name of God, the most compassionate and most merciful, and peace and blessing be on Prophet Muhammad and his relatives and companions. Thank you, Mr. Ahmed, for the introduction. In fact, this panel discussion regarding the issue of evaluation for improvement and enhancing the performance. There are different angles from which we can look at this, but I found that the best description for summarizing that the development for learning, and I will start by a phrase that about the use, how we use the outcomes on which we build a useful feedback. So I'm going to introduce some practices, international practices, and I'm going to talk about the practices here in Saudi Arabia, about the assessment for development. Evaluation and assessment is one of the educational concepts, and in the 80s there was a focus on the use of development as an introduction into the assessment for the development, and the focus at that time were about how we use the outcomes and providing a detailed feedback. In the past, the objective was making a decision or taking a decision. But recently, we must take these outcomes, and according to that, we provide detailed feedback about what has taken place and what are the points that need improvement. Through the literature, the evaluation that is used or practiced in two areas. Either it is used in accountability or in development. In the accountability, it is used on the national level. National tests and examinations and international examination and test So on this we build an accountability and penalties and incentives. The other track, which is focusing on assessment for development, but each one has its own conditions regarding the application. What is practiced in advanced countries, we have both kinds of them. There is some way, some balance. We cannot that the accountability must not overwhelm the other type of assessment for education, as we have here in the first session in education in Finland, or reducing the burden of teaching, and the fear that most of the schools that face the accountability, they focus on teaching the students to have certain criteria in order to have in the national assessment, in order to not to be subjected to accountability. So the assessment or evaluation is the main center of educational system and the component of educational system. So we cannot develop the assessment unless we develop the policies. So I cannot use the ministry that has a challenge if they want to use the accountability. So they need a lot of time in order to put a model in order to apply the accountability. So we cannot apply the assessment because it has been developed and tried in a certain country without having any regard for the central system that is used in Saudi Arabia, and all this must be taken into account. The second type is the assessment for improvement. This has practices that depend whether it is on the classrooms, that is done by the teachers, or at the level of the educational administration, and this provide feedback for that their programs are effective, or would be on the national level. And this is not about the accountability, but it is making sure that the programs are effective. So in summary, this is what practice at the Ministry of Education in Saudi Arabia, as I have mentioned at the start. This might be some practices, and these practices might be fragmented. And in my experience, there were a lot of experiments, but the assessment experiences were not developed. There were tests, national tests, and tests for teachers, and detailed tests. There are a lot of tests. But we need to have an integrated system, make this process systematic, and to provide feedback for improving the efficiency. So there are international studies to make sure that our educational system, and there are a lot of fears, but we need a measurement in order to understand where we are and in which direction we are going to move. Thank you, Dr. Saleh, for sticking with the time limit. The second speaker is Professor Hodney Hobson.
He is a professor at the Department of Education, Foundations and Leadership in the School of Education, and teaching faculty member in the Center of Interpretive and Qualitative Research in the School of Liberal Arts in Dunedin University. He received his PhD from Curry School of Education, University of Virginia. He has done so many researches and raised so many questions about the qualitative and quantitative studies and research and statistics. We welcome Dr. Robinson, and the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. Assalamu alaikum. I bring greetings from my colleagues in the American Evaluation Association, but also at my home university, Duquesne University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I was asked to present some thoughts around evaluation for performance improvement and development. I should say that a lot of my work most recently has been focused around the attention to several program evaluation standards that the Joint Committee for Educational Evaluation has developed, made up of a variety of institutions in the United States. And 5 overarching program evaluation standards includes utility, feasibility, propriety, accuracy, and evaluation accountability. And so when I hear the speaker, the previous speaker, I hear many of these, as well as the previous speakers, I hear many of these overarching themes reflected in these commentaries. But the details are most important. And so what I'll speak about briefly, and hopefully there'll be more conversation, are examples, 2 examples from some work that I have ongoing now. One deals with evaluation of an arts education program in a local school district, and one deals with evaluation of a community-based effort around housing. The first one is an attempt to understand how, with funding support from a local foundation, how a school district is able to infuse arts education into their regular curriculum. At least in the context of the United States, arts education is something that has seen dwindling resources of recent, both primarily for political education reasons. There's a need to infuse arts education more into the curriculum. So while there's increasing attempts for discussions around science, technology, engineering, and math, there seems to be a dwindling amount of conversations around arts, for example. And so with the support of a local foundation, they've infused arts education in their larger curriculum in one large urban school district in the Northeast. And we've been evaluating that effort for the last 4 years. The principles of that arts education program, of which we've built our evaluation plan around, focused on things like collaboration between the teaching artists and the teachers. So teaching artists are brought in from out of school to assist in curriculum with teachers over the course of 2-3 days a week over the course of a year. Engagement, the extent to which students are engaged in the arts. Arts and academic learning, the extent to which students are receiving learning around arts. Performance as well as visual arts. Academic learning, the extent to which students are also building their academic learning through the arts, and a variety of other principles that this program is built upon. I would say that one of the critical elements and discussions of recent, and noticing the increasing learning that's taking place, are the challenges, and maybe we can talk more about this, the challenges that exist in actually seeing the details of evaluation for improvement over the course of about a 3 or 4 year period. Who's learning? What performances areas are being reached? What tensions are there, or what challenges exist between multiple levels of administrators, teachers? How do parents perceive these issues? How do students perceive these issues around arts education? And so part of the note that I take from the previous speaker, for example, is that we're talking about multiple levels, a variety of different stakeholders, lots of different expectations, and all have a vested interest in the issue at hand. The second example that I'll speak about very briefly is the issue around building evaluation capacity development amongst community members. Well, we all know that evaluation is not an easy term not only to pronounce, but it's also not an easy one to understand. And so part of it particularly with staff who have to respond to demands from other funders, is how to provide the support for staff who need to respond to demands from funders, clients, and stakeholders. And so most recently, a team of us from the local university in a local community are providing evaluation capacity support to local staff from a community agency who are in the process of working with hundreds of thousands and if not millions of dollars around building urban housing and other community needs in communities. And so I'll briefly say that this is also an incredible undertaking because staff themselves often are not trained in evaluation. They don't know what it is to do evaluation, and so maybe there will be an opportunity to talk more about this as well, the challenges and opportunities of training staff in capacity development.
Thank you. Thank you. Our third panelist is Professor Arlene Galickson, and he has a PhD in educational psychology, emphasis on research, evaluation, and measurement methods. He taught mathematics, physics, and chemistry at high school level in rural and suburban and military settings. Worked in higher education settings since 1971. The floor is yours for 5 minutes.
This was in Saudi, so I'm not sure what you said. But
Okay, it's in English already.
thank you for this opportunity to come and talk with you. I'm not quite sure how to begin this, but let me start by saying in the United States, where I reside, we have 50 states, and each state is responsible for its own education. It makes its own rules about how education should occur, how development and evaluation will be practiced. And then on top of that, we have a federal government that supports research and development within each of these states and across all of the states. Most of my work in the past 20 years has been engaged with working with the National Science Foundation grants and helping it to develop programs and implement programs relating to community college work. And then in addition to that, I worked as a professional with the Joint Committee on Standards for Educational Evaluation. And I want to talk with you briefly about that work with the Joint Committee because the 50 states have their own systems. Each school in the state has its own system. And each school generally has a school board that serves as the overall monitoring or management device for the school. It hires the administration, it hires the teachers, and it is responsible for spending the money that it receives for the school. The school administration typically has superintendents and principals that administer, oversee teachers, and make classrooms available and decide what is handled there. And then the teachers each have their own classrooms and work with students in those classrooms. So there's a multi-layered system of education work, and each of these areas requires development and evaluation. And interestingly, in our country, everybody is interested in evaluating those who serve under them. So the school board is interested in having evaluations of administrators. The administrators are interested in having evaluations of the teachers, and the teachers are interested in having evaluators of the students. But quite frankly, nobody's quite interested in having evaluation of themselves. So what we did with the Joint Committee was to help to develop some guidelines that would assist people in making good evaluative decisions about each of those levels. At the student level, we developed a set of student evaluation standards. At the teacher and administrator level, we developed a set of personnel evaluation standards. And for curriculum and program kinds of activities, we devised program evaluation standards. And I don't believe that Dr. Hobson mentioned it, but he was one of the primary authors of the program evaluation standards. Each of these sets of standards goes through a whole series of activities. Groups of people meet, and over approximately a 5-year span of time, they meet, talk about what are the key issues in development and evaluation practice within that area. They identify what they believe to be important standards, things that people should accomplish as educators for, say, personnel evaluation. Those ideas then are supported by guidelines, ways in which teachers, for example, should practice their work. And those guidelines and the standards then are submitted to what we call field trials or field tests. They're put into school systems by people to try out and see how they work. And then those ideas are brought back for revision of the standards, and these then at the same time are taken out to national meetings across the country for discussion, argument, determination as to what is the best way to proceed to make these standards. Ultimately, the Joint Committee reaches its conclusions about what these standards should include, and those are published as evaluation standards, and they're certified in our country by what's called the American National Standards Institute, and they're certified as American National Standards. There is a similar organization internationally, the International Standards Organization, of which the American National Standards Institute is part, and it is a place, I believe, where many of us could begin to collaborate and consider some of the issues that are common across countries. Certainly every country has its own culture, its own way of doing things, but so many of these issues that we've heard about today and we'll hear about in the continuing days are common across countries. So I think these standards are a good way for us to interact and think about some of the issues and talk directly about improving our schools.
Thank you. Thank you for good timing.
We have received some questions. I was about to start by a question that have been raised about the issue of assessment based on accountability, and this question is directed to Dr. Saleh. And the question says that the accountability assessment has no impact, and this could be moved to the so is there is an alternative, there is another alternative. So Mr. Saleh will answer this question, and if the other participants would like to participate, please. The accountability assessment has no impact or effect, and this could be extended to the education for assessment for, and this is developing. So we are going to exchange the translators, so please bear with us till we change from one translator to another one. Okay. No. وين هذه؟ عكستها.
The evaluation and assessment for the development all through the grade or the scholastic year. First it was the formative assessment, then the assessment for learning, and now we use the term assessment and evaluation for learning. All these acts are according to a very similar practices, I think that there will be an alternative, but we can't have a universal alternative, a one-for-all solution, and it can also be an alternative for the educational policies in a certain country. I can't say that this system is okay in a certain country and it's not good for the another districts. I think the utilization of technology is very nice, but if you have a direct question, I prefer this way of having questions instead of having questions through the technology and technological techniques. If you have any question here in the hall, I accept it directly and allow me, the organizers. I want to change the technique of receiving questions and answers. Do you have any direct question here? You have the floor there. Are you ready, or shall I move to another one? We have a question here. I will direct it to Professor Allen. Allen, what's the role of the institutions for preparing teachers in the evaluation of the teacher in the public and general education? What's the role of these institutions?
What is the role of the College of Education and institutions in the evaluation of teachers? Is there any role of those institutions? What is it? How to have more effective? You can take it.
The role of the colleges varies from state to state and even within the state. The evaluation, well, there are several levels of evaluation again. One is that each college of education is evaluated by an independent agency called NCATE, North Central Accreditation for Teacher Evaluation, and that it has its own set of policies and guidelines for what characteristics teachers are to have, what characteristics the teacher program is to have, and so each college goes through that evaluation practice. I'm not so familiar with it anymore, but roughly anywhere from 5 to 10 years between evaluations so that the college may practice what it does for 5 years and then get checked by NCATE, and if it passes, it goes for another 10 years. If NCATE isn't so happy with its findings, then it may go for a shorter span of time before it gets checked again, or it may have some more serious repercussions, meaning that they would have to change some aspect of their program. So there is that external agency. The colleges also provide some direct instruction for evaluation, but again, that varies greatly from state to state. The state I was most familiar with as a professor was South Dakota, and there every student at the elementary and secondary levels was expected to take a 2-credit course, meaning 2 hours per week for one semester, to learn about educational measurement and evaluation practices in the classroom, and that was their only direct instruction on evaluation practices. In the state of Michigan, they don't have the same requirements. They get whatever evaluation instruction they're going to have in what they call instructional methods courses. At the graduate level, they may get a course on evaluation, but it's not required in most teacher education settings.
Okay, thank you, Professor. Please note, we don't have to go in details, only for 2 minutes, maybe the maximum, for the answers. Before I'll give you a comments in this. Allow you to give some comments. But there is another question. You can tackle both. سؤال مدارس المرحلة
The primary schools are having the problem of the different levels and performance of the students. This is according to the lack of the single and unified mechanism, and this may lead to the weak outcomes of the primary stage. What's your comment?
Oh, okay, go ahead.
So let me return back to the previous question, which Dr. Gullickson began in response to the question about the role of institutions in preparing students and teachers in evaluation. And I'll just make a reference to NCAPE, but also your own National Commission for Academic Accreditation and Assessment, which is essentially another accreditation body, another evaluation body, which looks at standards for postgraduate programs. And so these accreditation programs are a larger global sense of what evaluation does. But schools of education, for example, in the United States are primarily the major vehicles that train master's level, PhD level students, and also some certificate level students in evaluation, and tends to be in educational evaluation and measurement. And those programs are several across a variety of different states in the United States. But also the growing need for evaluation is evident in institutes and other professional development conferences like the American Evaluation Association, Centers for Disease Control, Claremont Graduate University, Evaluators Institute, a variety of platforms that also support evaluation for people in a variety of different fields, whether it be health, agriculture, community, ministries, and so forth. And so there are beginning to be a plethora of variety of different mechanisms that support evaluation, understanding the need for evaluation in a larger context, the national context.
Shukran. Thank you.
In the name of Allah, if we need to develop the performance or having the required outcome, we have to have a very well constructed evaluation for having the desired outcome. The question is the evaluation after the teaching of the grade or not, or after lots of units with different aims. The evaluation is after the teaching of the chapter or the unit directly, or after teaching or studying some units or chapters that are different in their outcomes and their results. This question is a detailed question, and it is based on your aspiration of the evaluation. If this evaluation is not depending on the marks or scores, you can do it at any time, all through the unit or after the lesson, or if you have a formative evaluation, it will be at the end of the unit. But according to the interrelation of the units, it is a requirement if you want to evaluate higher skills of the students. For example, you can evaluate and assess the performance of the students after 3 units, for example, but we don't have a golden rule saying that you have to perform and implement the assessment at certain time, at certain point of time.
And it depends, is the answer. I mean, it depends upon a variety of things. Imagine a school district with 10 schools, and they decide in those 10 schools that one will assess at the end of 1 unit, another will assess at the end of the third unit, another will assess at the end of the year, and so forth. And so what you have a mixed bag of trying to determine across all those schools how students did. And so part of the challenge, at least if thinking about it in that one school district context, is thinking, what will we measure? What will we assess? When? And by whom? And so maybe it's useful for that school district to have a conversation, let's say, across a variety of different key persons about what would be most important to know. Is it important to know it at the end of the first unit? Is it important to know it at the end of the 10th unit? And to have some understanding across that whole system, what's being understood. This is the challenge of evaluation. Across what system, according to what units, what assessment, and what criteria. And so when we all understand that and have a better understanding of it, it does help to know what we're working for. And so it does depend, but it makes sense to have an understanding across a key set of groups and stakeholders about what we'll be doing at the same time. Or maybe it's important to know it at different times. And so that decision will have to be done collaboratively in discussion.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I have to go back to the continuous evaluation. The continuous evaluation in the primary stage is a common model. It is there since years ago, and it has been extended to the 4th grade, and it is now for the whole primary stages. Lots of questions are posed regarding the continuous evaluation, and the main question is the effectiveness of the continuous evaluation on the actual learning, and the effect and the implications on the preparatory and the higher and high school stages, especially on the reading skills and the writing skills. And the question is there is a project and program launched by the ministry, and it has been stopped at the 6th grade, but is the problem is in the effective application of this program, or is it according to the lack of the high skilled and qualified teachers, or is it the problem of providing this evaluation for the first 3 grades? We have a report issued by the UNESCO regarding this experience, but I feel that we were in haste in this project. I would like to listen from our speakers to talk about the continuous evaluation in the primary stage. What are the main tools that lead to the effective evaluation, continuous evaluation? And I think it is very easy for the teachers to have this continuous evaluation. I will start with Dr. Saleh. I witnessed the idea of the continuous evaluation since its inception. I have 3 points in a nutshell. The first one is the concept. When we want to use this concept in the primary stages, in the very early grades, then we move to the next stage. We meant to have the required and the desired qualifications and skills for the students. But the problem was in the linkage between this concept with another practice, such as moving or going to a higher grade. But we concentrated on the scoring, and we didn't focus on the precision. So the concept is in a way, and the performance and the precision is in another way. And after 9 or 10 years, this means that we have shortcomings in this relationship between the concept and the application. I think it's a very useful idea. It is fruitful and productive in many countries. It leads to the high performance and the high skills but there is a change of the intent and the outcome of this continuous evaluation. As for the qualification in the Education College and King Saud University, we have a single curriculum, and this content and curriculum does not meet the needs of the skills required by the teachers, so we should reconsider this issue. As for the training, a limited number of teachers are taking courses in the training on the assessment annually, so we have to think again in a better way in order to overcome the shortcomings of the practice and application of this continuous evaluation. Some people have a wrong idea regarding the continuous evaluation because they concentrated on going to higher stages and not on the precision. Do you have any other comments? Do you have any comment, professors?
Tfadal.
Thank you. My name is Alex Wiseman. I'm from Lehigh University in the U.S., on the other side of the state from you. And I had a question because earlier this morning we heard from a speaker from Finland talking about several different levels of evaluation, from the national all the way down to the classroom. And one of the questions that I continually come up against is how to connect the different stakeholders and measures and strategies that come out of those evaluations at the different levels. So how does a classroom level teacher get any value out of the national level assessments? And how do national level policymakers get any value out of what the teachers are conducting in the classroom? So instead of sort of siloing the evaluations at each of those levels, do you have any recommendations for strategies to connect them, or to maybe scale the classroom level ones up or the national level ones down? Thank you.
Thank you. So open.
My own thought is that the national level testing does almost nothing to serve the typical teacher, and that almost all of what can be done to really serve instruction and learning needs to be done within the classroom, and to help the teacher learn to ask viable questions, build viable rapport, build a whole structure for improving classroom practices, evaluative and instruction together, so that when we talk about national evaluations, it really is what I would call, for political purposes, selling the idea of evaluation, or the insufficiency of education rather than to improve education.
I could
Okay.
add as well.
More comments?
Yeah, I could add as well.
1 minute. 1 minute, please.
Excellent. Well, another great question, and in the minute or so, I'll just say that the distinction and the challenge is more than just at one level, but it's at translation. How do teachers translate and understand policies at a state level or the federal level? How do federal and state level administrators and policymakers translate that information to teachers? Different interests are at stake. Sometimes and often those have to do with issues of power. Policymakers operate at one level, teachers operate at another. Evaluators, if we're talking about the role of evaluators, can help to the extent to which they're aware at these multiple levels, and also the tensions and challenges therein between them. And so teachers very rarely go to major cities where policymakers are. Policymakers don't write for teachers. And so they're writing for different audiences. And so that in itself as well is the crux of a challenge in evaluation, is understanding the variety levels of where people are coming from, and evaluators can play a role to the extent to which they understand these effectively.
Thank you very much. نعود للأخت التي ودت أن تسأل.
Now we will back to our sister who was about to ask a question. In the name of Allah, I have a question to Dr. Saleh. It is regarding the evaluation. We know that we have multiple strategies and different tools and techniques in the evaluation, but we don't have precise standards for the precision of these tools. We cannot measure its effectiveness because we don't have certain tools to measure and assess these standards. This is very clear in the practical subjects. There is the absence of theoretical aspect in these practical subjects. Are there any clear-cut plan or standards that we can depend on in the evaluation of strategies and the evaluation of the evaluation strategies? Do you mean are you talking about the continuous evaluation? Yes, he says. First, we can't have a standard that is trusted 100%. So most of the time in the evaluation process we prefer that we depend on more than one source. We can evaluate and assess any item from different perspectives in order to be able to take a certain decision. If we are evaluating programs or performance at the level of the classroom, we cannot judge from one side. If we have to take an item and issue a judgment or evaluation, this will not be 100% authenticated. We want to make sure that every measurement is very authenticated, so we resort to many different tools, and every strategy is related to its aims and goals, but in the framework, the general framework, this leads to setting standards and indicators for the assessment tools. If these tools are interlinked with the indicators, this will be more authenticated in order to have a precise judgment. We have a question for Dr. Dr. Allen. I have a question. What are the standards of the evaluation of teachers from your point of view and the effective practice internationally? The standards of the evaluation of the performance of teachers at the international level and the best practices as well.
Well, I've not worked directly with people on an international level. I've only helped to develop the standards in our own country, so I can't speak directly to international standards. I can tell you that the standards, as Dr. Hobson mentioned, each focus on 4 different areas: one on propriety, another on usefulness or utility, another on making things feasible, viable to do in the school, and the 4th on making sure that they're accurate and what we call valid. The biggest difficulty that we tend to find in working across countries is in the area of propriety. What is considered proper interaction with students and with teachers in one country can be quite different from what it's viewed to be in another country. For example, just observing here today, women and men are not seated together, talking together, working together in the class, in this discussion or in classrooms here, where in the U.S. women and men work together on a daily basis and quite directly with each other. And so there are different rules of engagement, so to speak, how people work with each other, and that's probably the biggest area of difficulty across international borders, I think.
Thank you. سؤال قد يكون للجميع.
Every one of the speakers here, what are the successful and suitable techniques and methods in order to make sure that any educational system is effective, and how can we see this at a practical level in our schools in Saudi Arabia, from your point of view and from the point of view of the assessment and evaluation process as well.
Ready?
I won't say very much on this. I'll be speaking about this after prayer, and I have a presentation on culturally responsive evaluation. I can talk more about that. That is the extent to which we understand our local context, our local cultural context, and how we think about evaluation. And so I'll save some of my comments for then.
Okay. Comment?
I couldn't hear the question, so I'll pass.
Okay, go Salah. Go Salah.
From the review of what has been done in different countries in order to upgrade the level of the education process, we can see that there is no certain and specific means and tools for the whole countries, but there are some common standards that are applied in many countries. First, having or setting standards. There should be clear-cut standards understood by everybody who work in the pedagogical field. Second, we should construct and build different tools and not to resort and depend on a single tool. Third, there should be an interpretation for the systems and the tools applied in this system. Then we start from the baseline, then we come higher in this system. Maybe this will be the last question, and I think it's for everybody, or this for the speakers. And I think we tackled this question during your presentations. The question is regarding the challenges. What are the challenges and the impediments faced by the learner, and how can the assessment and evaluation help overcome these challenges? The challenges and impediments and obstacles.
Professor?
What are the challenges?
What's the challenges
and
facing
impediments?
the learner, and how we can, through the evaluation, can help in reducing them?
All right. I think the biggest challenge facing our evaluation practices is there is so much focus on the judgment of good or bad rather than how to improve, providing feedback for the people. So I think changing the orientation of evaluation from focusing on making the judgment about quality as to how to move us effectively toward better quality is, I think, one of the things that is a big challenge, and if we can succeed, we'll make things much better for evaluation.
Thank you.
To my mind, the biggest challenge is not having learning and education. All the components in the educational system are focused on only for the learners and the outcomes of the learning process, and this is the main challenge. To overcome this, we can have many tools. First, one of them is that the learner should participate effectively in the self-assessment. We should train teachers to get the students familiar with the self-assessment. This is one of the solutions in order to help the learners and the students overcome this challenge.
We have a saying, pardon my Englishisms, but perfect is the enemy of the good. Perfect is the enemy of the good, such that when we focus, as Dr. Gullikson said, on if we don't focus on the aspect of learning, we find ourselves challenged considerably. Teachers' quality, school quality, without a clear focus on learner quality, learners will suffer clearly if these other elements are not clear. And so we should be focusing on this aspect of learning without making judgments of wrongness, but assisting learners as well through the process.
شكرا ولابد أن ننهي بدقيقة واحدة.
In 1 minute, I have to sum up, and you have 1 minute. Every speaker have 1 minute to sum up this session. You have the floors for 1 minute. The education system is very complicated, lots of problems, and the evaluation assessment does not have a magical solution for all these complex processes, but undoubtedly it helps solve a big part of the problem if we apply it in a correct way, and if we make the best use of the outcomes suitably, maybe at the level of the school, the classes and the schools and the education process as well.
Best I can say at this point in time is that we share a very important and difficult, complex question about how to use evaluation effectively to serve our children, to serve our schools, to serve our countries. And I hope that we can work together effectively toward a positive use of evaluation practices. I don't want to see us throw out evaluation because it's so difficult, but rather I hope we will work together to make positive changes.
Thank you.
It's an incredible opportunity now for those who use evaluation. And so the role of evaluations in our larger, complex, and international and local ecologies is becoming most and most important. And while our speakers continue to say there's no quick fix, there's no panacea, we also recognize it's an incredible opportunity for us and to embrace it and to facilitate a larger learning throughout multiple levels, from teachers, students, to policymakers, those at the state and federal levels throughout this country and throughout the world.
شكرا وشكرا.
Thank you everybody for being with us today. Thank you the participants in this session for your time, and I hope that we were helpful in answering your questions. And this forum and this exhibition is in the very beginning, and if we don't answer today your questions, you can answer and pose these questions in the next sessions at the end of the session. I would like to thank everybody. I would like to thank the speakers. I would like to thank you, the participants, and our brothers in the Ministry of Education. Thank you very much. May Allah's peace and blessings be upon you all. Thank you for the participants, and thank you for the speakers. Now we will break for a short time, then we will back to the third session in which we will tackle some of the issues. One of them is the importance and the significance of the technical assistance in the evaluation process, and the evaluation stage through the cultural context or cultural responsive context in the 21st century by Dr. Rodney Howson, and we will listen from Dr. Saleh and Dr. Fatma regarding the tools of the evaluation in the secondary school. And I hope that this session will start in 5 minutes from now. I hope that we will break only for 5 minutes, and we will be delighted to have you at the specified time for this session. Thank you very much.